Welcome to BN America's webinar on the potential impacts of the process to write a new Chilean constitution. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Welcome to BN America's webinar on the potential impacts of the process to write a new Chilean constitution. I'm Senior Editor Sebastian Perez Ferreiro. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. I'd like to remind all participants that they're in listen-only mode. Questions can be submitted at any time using the chat function on the right side of the screen. Time permitting, we will try to answer your questions at the end of the discussion panel. Soon you'll hear from two of Chile's most respected lawyers specializing in mining and energy matters, Ronnie Zimmerman and Cristian Araya, in a roundtable discussion moderated by our content director, Cesar Iliano. But first, let's review the events that changed Chile's political scenario and paved the way for a new Magna Carta. Back in October 2019, a protest over a metro fare hike of 30 pesos, the equivalent of 4 US cents, led high school students to stage turnstile jumping protest at Santiago's subway system. Pretty soon, thousands of people were protesting not only in the stations, but also on the streets. The protest turned violent, metro stations were set on fire, so were buses and buildings, and there was looting. On October 19, 2019, President Sebastián Piñera decreed a state of emergency and called on the military to patrol the streets of Santiago in an attempt to control the chaos. But the demonstrations continued on a daily basis, and every Friday the protest movement would converge in the downtown square known as Plaza Italia, which demonstrators dubbed Plaza Dignidad, as the protests were now much more than just about a metro fare hike. It was about the perception of growing inequality, insufficient pension income, poor healthcare coverage, and low quality public education. On October 25, 2019, over 1 million people gathered at Plaza Italia. It was the biggest demonstration in the country's history, and one of its demands was a new constitution to replace the 1980 Magna Carta written by the Pinochet dictatorship. The following month, Piñera's ruling coalition and most opposition parties signed an agreement that called for a referendum to let the country decide whether it wanted a new constitution. About a year later, in October 2020, an overwhelming 78% of the population voted in favor of drafting a new Magna Carta through a constitutional assembly. Chile is now getting ready to choose their 155-member Constitutional Assembly on April 11th. This body will have up to a year to come up with a draft for a brand new constitution. It's worth emphasizing that this is not just a reform. They are literally starting with a blank page. To make it into the draft, each proposed constitutional article needs to secure 2/3 approval in the Assembly. Then in or around August 2022, there will be a new referendum vote in which the population will approve or reject the Constitution as written by the Assembly. Voting will be mandatory. If approved, the Constitution will be published in the official Gazette in the ensuing 10 days and will enter in effect on that date. There were originally more than 3,000 candidates vying for a seat in the Assembly, though many have since been disqualified. Some of the candidates are established politicians, such as one-time center-left presidential hopeful Beatriz Sánchez, while others are niche activists and representatives of social movements. There will be 17 seats reserved for indigenous peoples, including the Mapuche community, and the Assembly will have gender parity, making Chile the first country to have a constitution drafted by an equal number of men and women. A key issue in the draft of the Constitution will likely be water rights. Chile has been suffering from a mega drought for over a decade, as the country has had below normal rainfall since 2010. The controversial 1981 Water Code, which has been protected by Pinochet's constitution, established markets to reallocate water rights to high-value users. There have been growing calls over the years to nationalize water resources in order to prioritize human consumption. And a recent Supreme Court ruling is drawing more attention to this issue. The top court ordered a municipality to ensure that each resident can access 100 liters per day after Valparaiso region authorities lower the available volume of potable water by decree. Experts disagree about the potential impact of the process to draft Chile's new constitution. While the progressive U.S. think tank Wilson Center sees the process as validating Chilean society's demand for deep change, the more conservative Cato Center believes that voters have unrealistic expectations about what a new constitution will mean for their everyday lives. It's now time to turn it over to our panelist. With us is Ronnie Zimmerman, a lawyer specializing in natural resources and mining at Lembeye Abogados, and Cristian Araya, Director of Energy, Projects, and Sustainability at law firm Albagli Saliasnik. The discussion will be moderated by BN America's Content Director, Cesar Iliano. Over to you, Cesar.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for the introduction and for explaining what might happen this year in Chile. As you may know, BN Americas is headquartered in Santiago, Chile. We've had a very intense 2020, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of this series of political events, which should end up next year with a new constitution. Of course, there are still lots of questions around the outcome of this process. The next important date is April 11th, when Chileans will choose the members of the convention, which will have the task to write the new constitution. So, as you may know, two of the more important industries that we cover in BN Americas is electric power and mining. And so we decided it would be a good idea to organize this discussion panel with Cristian and Ronnie. We want to better understand what may happen and how these events may impact these key industries. So, Ronnie, Cristian, thank you very much for being with us today. I'd like to start this discussion panel with an open questions in more general terms. What would you say is the best and worst case scenario for the investment sentiment in these two industries this year, taking into consideration not only the constitutional convention, but also the presidential election that we will be having in November? Cristian, I don't know if you want to start.
Hello, Cesar. Thank you very much for inviting us. Hello, Ronnie. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm trying to get some ideas that may help somebody there. I have a sentiment in this respect that very much is not related with any extreme. Although that is what we have seen through the past days, particularly in the press, something very following all the protests and the feelings of the people in terms of what they dislike of the current situation in the country and the constitution. I finally believe that the common sense and the balanced perspectives will prevail. And I think that the slate of members to write the new constitution will vary in perspective that will be certainly focused on what should be the best solutions for the interest of the country as a whole. So I don't think we'll have a great, phenomenal constitution in terms of legal practice, but I don't feel as well that we will end up with something that is very messy and that increases demands in a unpractical way. So I do think that the reasonableness of most of the elements that we have at stake will take place in the discussion, and we will obviously have some relevant changes. And it's interesting that we can discuss this today, particularly with respect to environment and certain public goods that are basic for mining and energy. But that's my primary thinking on this.
And thank you. And then Ronnie, are you on the same line?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for the invitation, Cesar. Sorry, Cesar Cristian, I had a little technical issue there. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here to speak with you all on this interesting and really important topic for Chile and for both the energy and mining markets. In general, yeah, I'm on the same line. I think that there's extremes that have clearly been presented in the context of the creation of this situation and the debate, but it seems to be channeling in a more reasonable way, and let's hope it stays that way. With respect to your question about what's the best and worst case scenario for investment, I think lawyers often are criticized for not giving straight answers, but I think in this case it's not easy to give a clear answer because there's a wide range of views, and it'll depend on what kind of project you're looking at, what country you're investing from, perhaps other factors such as Christian just mentioned, which are the delegates that are going to be designated to the convention, which we'll know quite soon, if it's going to be more reasonable delegates or if you're going to have an important crop of quite extremist delegates. So it'll also depend, the investment into Chile will depend on, for at least in mining, on if the currently strong commodities market continues, so that and general common considerations such as environmental situations, community matters relating to specific projects. So all of those will have an impact, not just the current constitutional and general election debate. Now, having said that, with respect to my experience recently, in the past year or so since this has taken place, mining companies are of two minds. Some are taking a wait and see approach, particularly the larger ones that have an immediate investment, very large investment that has to be implemented. But many more, again, personal view, are continuing with projects if they were worthy and valid, in line with what Christian said. Larger companies are used to working in diverse jurisdictions with diverse constitutional systems remining. And in that context, I think they see Chile as one of the more stable jurisdictions, notwithstanding what we've seen on the news and what was seen internationally on the news over the past year. No doubt concerns were raised that violence, that initiated this constitutional process could get out of control and lead to more extreme results in the constitutional process. But in general, one can also see that this process has been channeled into an orderly process, at least to date. I mean, you can, yeah. We'll get into it. So and just to wrap up your question, large projects have been recently announced, such as the Salares Norte project that was just announced a few weeks ago. It's going full steam ahead. In my experience, there's many exploration projects that are continuing because those are more short-term oriented. So I think the best case is that mining will continue as is, and even a super case, maybe even the amendment to the Constitution will make improvements. But I think a more reasonable scenario is that very large projects may have a little bit of wait and see to see how things plan out, and we'll know, we'll have a very good way to take the temperature this coming April when we see who finally results in the Constitutional Convention.
Yeah, yeah, understand. But before jumping into the specifics of the sectors, I do feel that maybe the worst case scenario is that the people writing the constitution do it with an eye on the streets and make decisions depending on what's the temperature on the street. For instance, if there's more civil unrest or any other violence, if any of the key issues don't make it to the final text. Do you see that as a possible scenario?
This is Ronnie. I'll reply. Yes, I mean, clearly, and clearly, there's two things. So you're right. It's not just who the delegates are for the convention, but it's also how the delegates are affected with what's happening on the street. If you have a reasonable crop of delegates, but there's a lot of violence out on the streets, but because certain issues are seen not to be addressed, that could have an effect. I have somewhat, and I hope it's not Pollyannish, I have a somewhat of an optimistic view in the sense that the level of violence that one saw in October to, let's say, October 2019 to March 2020 will not come to pass again. There will be violence, but it'll be hopefully better contained. Hopefully our authorities have learned something with respect to crowd control, etc. And also there will be some pushback because the process which is going on right now is a very legitimate process which has been widely approved by the Chilean public. And so if you want to see your changes implemented, they should be implemented through this constitutional process that's going on right now and not through the violence. It is a risk, I agree. And I think there will be some level. I just hope that it's lower than what happened before.
Thank you.
Hi, this is a good answer, I think, from Ronnie. And I would just stress that one key word that he just said, which is legitimacy. I think that any public order unrest that you may have will directly depend on the sense that the people and how the people in the persons or the delegates that are running into the constitution process will handle the people in the streets. And that's because the bottom line here is that most of the Chilean people really wanted to have the possibility of not particularly make outrageous changes, but basically participate and make their voices to be heard in the discussion of relevant aspects of their lives. So if that is duly handled and we can have evidence in terms of the issues at the discussion that are reflecting what the real concerns of the persons are today, which is basically the problem that causes all the turmoil during 2019 and last year, will very much calm down all the expectations and will make everybody reasonably positive with the results. Obviously, there will be people that would like to have and they will fight for some extreme position, but at least as soon as they see that their issues or the key issues are taken into consideration one way or another, will all the set of process that is reasonable and natural in these cases, I think it will have everybody very much calm. And we also don't need to forget all the effects and the psychological situation that has been driven through most of last year and unfortunately this year as well with the pandemic. This will also, I think, have an impact in what the people think that the situation will start to be driven or to be changed.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll jump now into the more specific questions on the sectors that you are experts at. So Christian, just to understand better how we got here, on what situation the industry is now or was last year, do you think that the weaker power demand due to the pandemic and all these events political events in Chile will somehow slow down the project development in the electric power industry? And tell us about what was your experience during last year?
Okay. Yes, I think that it's a fact that electric demand didn't grow during 2020, but and that the pandemic and all the problems did have an impact on the growth of consumption in several industries. But I think that we have some factors that let us be more optimistic on what we are going to see during this year and in the future to come, because what we have seen in the past months, although create with additional problems and a substantial slowdown in terms of the path that the projects were having before. But I haven't seen a project or a specific development that was already planned to be completely cancelled, and I think that's a good sign. But we have also some other factors that give us more on the same line. There is, I think the number is 5.1% forecast for increase in the electric demand. So, and that's a very good number, having 0 or less than 0 today. But I would like to mention certain other issues that I think will help to think positively in this respect. First of all, transmission industry is expected to have a very relevant movement and increase in investment in this year, and that's why, because that is because we it is required to face the increasing addition of renewable power generation that has been continuing put on the system, and that clearly needs investment in transmission in the electric transmission industry to prevent congestion problems. And if you add that to the decarbonization policy that it's being taken very actively by the government in several areas, which will replace the obsolete coal-fired power plants, all of this, not to say without any problem, but in general terms will, I think, enhance the positive view of investments and will create a good path in terms of the energy industry. For example, we know that Camallo Aguirre electric line, with an estimate cost of over $1 billion, and that would be the first DC line to be built in Chile, will be the matter of an international bid process expected to be awarded during October 2021. But also new facilities for more than, I think, $200 million have been awarded last year and have been recently awarded by the Coordinador Eléctrico in several sectors in terms of national lines or specific zones lines or local lines. So that will really inject a lot of activity and investment in the area. Secondly, as I mentioned, it is expected more than, I think, 5.5 thousand renewable megawatts to be incorporated from now on until December 2022, which is also a very important promotion in the energy sector. We know that renewables have a very significant impulse during the last decade or more, and last year represented more than 21% of the installed capacity in Chile, which is doubling the last 5 years, and it's also overpassing the legal goal that the authority had for renewables.
There are some movements and some things that have been happening that will continue to go on and need to go on despite whatever environment we see in the political scenario, right?
Sure, that's for sure.
And
I think that a third element, and that's just to finish, and I will pass on to Ronnie because probably he will have something more detailed to say about it, which is exactly as he mentioned before, that a significant growth in the mining industry is also expected to be occurring during the following years.
Yeah, Ronnie mentioned some of the projects that have been approved in recent days. So I know, Ronnie, that you're usually in contact with foreign companies looking to get involved in mining projects in Chile and financing or operating. Or I mean, when some of these discussions or negotiations started last year to end up, for instance, with this project being approved right now this year, when they started talking about what to do in Chile next year, or sorry, this year, 2021, what were the main concerns, or what was in the mind of those who said, okay, let's wait and see?
Well, okay, there's, again, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, and trying not to be repetitive, but the considerations that we've seen for investment in Chile have not changed substantially based on the occurrences that have happened. Clearly, they're asking questions with respect to they're asking opinions on what they think will happen, what the process is to work this out, etc. But the considerations for investment in Chile from 2019, 2020 into 2021 are primarily the ones that always existed. Geological conditions, technical considerations. Does the project make sense economically? They will consider clearly Chile's historic stability, rule of law, mining capacity, the knowledge of its labor force, all of these issues, you know, what the specific environmental considerations for a particular project, the indigenous community relations issues that may arise in the project, water supply, taxes. So these questions that we've traditionally heard from investors and parties that are involved in taking place or financing projects are the same ones we've been hearing. Of course, along with that, they're asking the questions about the current constitutional situation, the social situation, and the elections. But the the need, I guess, for the investment and I guess the positive reputation that Chile has had historically has shown to have some weight. And my view is many times with foreign investors have seen this less dramatically than local investors. As I said many times, foreign and especially the major companies and even the junior explorers have had experience working in diverse jurisdictions and are used to kind of seeing that changes can occur and sometimes much greater than what's going on in Chile. And if I can just add that the reason that the constitutional issue is important for investors also for Chile, even though it's there's some sort of level of trust in the way things will work out here, is because unlike in other countries, the mining is directly and expressly noted in the Chilean constitution. So a change in our constitutional system doesn't just indirectly affect mining, but it affects expressly and directly the rules that govern the mining. The foreign investors that have had confidence in the Chilean market.
Is clear?
See, Cesar, could
Yeah, it was just a 2-second pause. Don't you worry. So you would say that when we look at Cochilco's portfolio of 3.3 billion in mining projects that should start operations this year, in a general view, you would say that there's no big risk of some of those projects just completely being canceled or postponed till next year.
Yes, I mean, again, there's clearly Fitch Ratings has said that things are going to slow down. Diego Hernandez of Tsunami also said that it's likely that Chilean investments may slow down. Our view is that things, it's possible that you'll have a wait and see if you've already got a project that's just ready to go and that you have to press a green light on spending the money. You'll wait a couple months perhaps to see what is going to happen in the designation of the constitutional delegates. But in general, I see that everybody's taking the steps to continue unless something dramatic happens. And that's the temperature that I've seen. So I think that Cochilco budget, as far as any prognostications can go, they always have their variances. But I think that not because of this factor will it be going down significantly. Again, that's our view. As I said, there are other industry leaders who see things a little bit differently.
Right, thank you. Let's go back to Christian and electric power. Do you see, Christian, any regulation changes ahead that go in hand with the constitution process, or any other channel that may be going forward? Any regulation that investors should be aware of? And the second question is, do you think that the new constitution will strengthen the right to live in a pollution-free environment, as it's mentioned in the constitution we have nowadays?
I think that it will do. In terms of constitutional debate, even though there may appear ideas, or I've heard, for example, some ideas trying to propose the inclusion of access to electricity, for example, as a social right. I believe that substantive analysis may come from the effect that public goods related with the energy production, such as water or the general environment or the use of land, may be directly involved. In my view, probable issues in this respect may include the raise to the constitutional range of the commitment already implemented and being taken forward by the government to achieve a carbon neutral environment on 2050. In order to mitigate the climate change impacts and in line with all the policy that has been followed by the Chilean, by Chile in general, with respect to all the international treaties and the Paris Accord, etc. Also, I think that there may be ideas assuring or trying to put forward particular regulation assuring environmental conditions and fair treatment for the generations to follow, which is basically saying let's take a more responsible view in terms of what we are doing, how are we going to handle all the environmental impacts, and not let's do the party and let's and see how our children or grandchildren will deal with it in the years to come. And thirdly, but not less important, is um, the regulation related to the water, particularly in terms of how you will define or how it will be determined in terms of constitutional and legal regulation. How do you how the ownership related to the water right, and how you assure the right of access for the population consumption, and also the protection of ecological systems. I think all those issues will clearly be put on the table and the discussion. But
yeah, I just sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, because as you were talking, I got a question from someone in the audience saying something that's not related with the constitutional process, but it's still on the table now. It says there is an initiative on the way that passed the environmental committee of the lower chamber in Congress about an accelerated coal decommissioning schedule by 2025. I'm curious if they have a view on that. So while we are expecting big changes in with the constitution, there are some other things going on before, right?
For sure. And apart from that project that I've heard about it, you also have some other regulations that are already put in place or in the process, which are those related to the changes in the distribution industry, which are very relevant, some of them, particularly the portabilidad eléctrica, which means that you will have a change in several aspects. The plan is to have several aspects changed or modified with respect to the distribution industry, but they will start with this one, which basically will incorporate the commercialization or the marketing companies in the legal system of electricity, which probably, or the expectation is that will create more competition and probably more a decrease in the prices for the final consumers. You also have the recently approved energy efficiency law, which is very important, and it has very broad impacts because it applies to a wide range of consumptions in terms of the transport industry, for example, the industry as such, and the mining, residential and retail. That is very important because it adopts the efficiency, the energy efficiency as a public policy, and it has a complete regulation with respect to planning for 5 year on a 5-year terms, and which has some goals to reduce it through different terms in the future. It also creates new standards for vehicles and to promote the electric vehicles particularly, which I think will enhance a lot the import and the changes from the consumers in terms of how they will deal with the mobility, and it also creates some tax benefits in that respect. It also have or allows the regulation of a tremendous big issue today that it will need a particularly webinar as such, which is the hydrogen and green hydrogen, particularly, which this law provides for the this fuel is considered to be an energy source, so that allowing legally the possibility to regulate a lot of aspects that the industry is eager to have, because there's a lot of expectation on that industry as well. And it also promotes rational energy in general. You also have this project that someone asked for the panel, which is that is trying to put forward a quicker demobilization, so to speak, of the coal-fired plants. I think that it's a very debatable issue. It has created a lot of expectations, and in my view, that is something that it has to be taken very carefully, because it's great and it sells a lot to say that we are all clean, we're all green, we all want renewables and etc., which is great, but you as a state need and an industry as a whole needs to do it in a reasonable way and in a safety way. So you cannot just cut off all the support and the capacity that you may have available in terms of availability and reliability for the system just in 2, 3, or 4 years without having a plan, without having other sources that may help in taking care of the variability, which is a fact in terms of the renewable industry. So I don't think that this project will have much, it will have a lot of attention, but I don't think it will have much success if it doesn't take care on a reasonable basis of how we are going to deal with it. Yes, there are some other sources. We are also involved very much in the gas industry, for example, and we are very close to that. But you need to look very carefully how are you going to do and what are you going to do. There is also a related aspect to this law, which is the recently published and approved modification to the regulation on capacity, which put forward another debate, which is the so-called facilities under estado de reserva de emergencia, which is a sort of a strategic reserve capacity state, which has also created a lot of debate, because some which are some of the critics have very reasonable arguments in terms of saying why we need to pay as a system for power plants that are not really ready to bring up capacity to it, and they're just be there on a sort of hibernation to just in case we need a big emergency. But so there's a lot of things going on, and I think it will very much develop during this year.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I have 2 questions for Ronnie now. One from us and one from the audience. Christian mentioned the water issue. It looks like it's one of the points that everybody's talking about when they are discussing what may happen with the new constitution. And we've seen, for instance, companies doing statements about brine and saying it should, arguing why it should continue to be regulated as a mineral, not as water. So I don't know, Ronnie, if you can do a summary of all things around water that mining investors are looking at when analyzing what may happen with the new constitution.
Well, as Christian just said, I think you need a whole webinar to discuss everything about water, because as you have mentioned and Christian mentioned earlier, water is clearly, and even in the introduction, water is clearly one of the unlike directly mining and directly energy, which have indirect claims under this constitutional process. I think water has been one of the banners, along with perhaps pensions and other things, with respect to the demands that the Chilean population has had with things that they see have been correctly or incorrectly unfair and not duly protected under the Constitution. So first, I'll answer your kind of niche question or specific question with respect to brine. That's kind of a very particular question that has to do with Chile, as many who are listening will know, has is one of the large or the largest lithium producers, or has the largest lithium resources in the world, and those are basically in salares, in salt flats that are in the north of Chile, and with those salt flats have a mixture of water and salt, which from which the lithium is extracted. So you process the water that's in the brine and you extract the lithium. And there's an argument as to whether that brine is a mineral or is water. If it's a mineral, and the person that has the mining concession right, the constitutionally guaranteed mining concession right, that's why it's a constitutional issue, then they have the control over that asset, and the water that is extracted from the brine in the process is controlled by the person that has the mineral right. On the other hand, if that brine is considered to be water, then the other water holders, or the persons that have the water rights over that water in that area, will have the control over that. And in the area where the lithium exists, most of that water rights, in many cases, are held by indigenous communities, and the minerals, if it's a mineral right, is held by the only two large lithium producers in Chile, which is SQM and Albemarle. So there's an issue there. And right now, brine is considered a mineral, and so the kind of the private sector has the control over that, and and that's part of the general argument that leads to this constitutional situation we're in right now. You have indigenous communities claiming that should be considered water, etc. So I don't think that that's going to change. That particular part's going to change on the level of the Constitution. I think the only thing that is interesting in that part is that lithium is the only mineral that's expressly exempted from the right of private individuals to have concessions over. So in other words, lithium is nationalized. There are some people that would like all minerals in Chile to be nationalized. Lithium, for all intents and purposes right now, is nationalized. All other minerals, even uranium, are not. So, but I don't think, so that brine water issue is something that's definitely going to come up, I think, in lower level discussions, maybe in legislative discussions. I don't think it's going to be part of the constitutional debate. The water debate clearly is one of, as we've mentioned, one of the key debates here, because the understanding of the population, and this is all clear, is reflected in the legal structure that's been established, is that there is not a priority, or at least there's not sufficient priority for human consumption for water under the current laws. And so the water, the asset is distributed primarily based on the ability to purchase the water rights, and the ability of the authorities to supersede the private water rights that one has acquired is limited, or at least much more limited than in other parties. Also in Chile, there's not a central water administrator that has strong authorization to direct water in areas that are required particularly when there are water rights that aren't existing. So I think that under this constitution, clearly this is going to be one of the banners. This is going to be one of the debates that's going to take place to at what level the right for human consumption is going to prevail over the private sector, which are also very important because it has to do with primarily with agriculture, not so much with mining, although mining is relevant, but primarily with agriculture and other productive sectors that also need to continue. You also need to limit that right to human consumption so that it's a right that isn't used in a populist manner by a government that doesn't worry about human consumption for the generations that are to come. But it's something that's going to be regulated, and it's an aspect that when investors are looking at Chile, that's more than the mining rights question. It's what's going to happen with water rights that is asked about and will be discussed.
You're saying that we will definitely see some change in the way the water rights are given now.
I do think so. I think, like I said, I think there's some things that will likely change less, as like the mining rules. There may be some more limited mining rules, such as the rules with respect to concessions, and if you need to use them or lose them, as they say, or if there has to be higher patente fees, if there's a royalty, those kind of. But I think the property rights over mining concessions will continue. With respect to water and environment in general, I think there will be a very taking a chance to say I think there will be changes and giving a higher priority with respect to the rights of communities, the rights of human consumption over private use and the private rights. I think that's very challenging also because there are acquired rights. So any changes that come will require expropriations and it will not be easy to implement. But I do think that this is a place where there's a general consensus in Chile. And when you asked about violence, I don't perceive violence, but this is one of those points where if things aren't reasonably changed, there could be a strong reaction in against that. So.
And there's
I have sorry, Cesar. I think it's important issue here. I have the same view. I do believe that the water discussion will clearly have a huge impact, and we will for sure see a significant not only discussion but regulation in the constitution with respect to this water consumption rights, etc., as Ronnie just mentioned. And it's very important as well because it also, as you can expect, have a huge impact in several industries. And in particular, what I missed a lot is that because of this discussion and with the civil unrest that we have lived and the pandemic and all the stuff, we have put a stop with a regulation that was being developed so far until a couple of years ago that I follow very closely because we're also advising on that, and I think it's something very relevant, which is the desalination industry, and that will also we should see something with respect to that as well.
Yeah, and there's a tough one for Ronnie here coming from the audience. I hope you don't hate me. It says, if the Chilean constituents decided to take a resource nationalist approach and renegotiate contracts, what would be the legal strategy of mining companies?
Well, that's I welcome that question. That's an excellent question. It's an excellent theoretical question because I hope, because I think sincerely that although there are groups that are pushing for nationalization of mineral rights, etc., I don't see that as one of the as opposed to water. I don't see that as one of the banners. There's ancillary rights which have to do with indigenous communities, which have to do with water rights, which have to do with prioritization of the environment, but perhaps and smaller regulations such as improving the concessions structure where they have to be used and not used as just simply you can sit on them for speculative purposes. There may be a royalty that's implemented, but I don't see a nationalization of the mining industry as one saw, for example, in 1970. That's not something that has broad, even, you know, that has broad appeal. Although there clearly are people that are pushing for that, I don't think that's going to happen. But if that were to happen, I think the strategy for mining companies is there's several, but you have what is understood in Chile as acquired rights. You have legal rights that are acquired. So any modification of those do require compensation, indemnification from the state. And Chile is also a very proactive member of the ICSID, of the International Court on Investment Disputes, CIADI in Spanish. And we have, and so debates and conflicts that can come up, Chile has both been a claimant and claimed against, and is a good kind of world citizen in that sense, that it complies with the rules. So if a company were to have that, you could take that to arbitration, amongst other things. I mean, there's other legal, but one of the routes would be take it to the ICSID and challenge that there. And it's a very independent tribunal which will rule accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. Now we have some more minutes for one final questions. As you may know, that there are many people listening to you now that are not here in Chile, and we also have this the presidential election coming on November. I know that there's still. I mean, there are some candidates, but anything can happen in a year like this in Chile. And I just wanted to ask if have you heard any proposals or ideas or plans from any of the candidates or pre-candidates that investors should be taking a look at?
Christian, why don't you go first?
Well, that's a very, I think, tricky question, because, yeah, you hear some outrageous, crazy ideas in terms of we're gonna do this and that, but history has shown us that those ideas that may have a huge impact in terms of what the rights and situation of the population will it may change a lot. I don't think there will be they will have any success on that respect. For sure, we will have a more street-oriented policies, I think, as I think Ronnie mentioned at the beginning, because clearly what the population is expecting is to be heard, which is the biggest criticism that we have seen in the past with respect to the Congress, for example, which most of the people see them as just persons doing what they think is best for their own interests and not for the interests of the country. So I do believe that any presidential candidate that has a successful possibility in terms of coming into la moneda will vary the impetus of the regulation towards all the social rights and particular expectation that we have just mentioned in terms of pension rights, environmental effects on the population, indigenous population, and probably more or also oriented on the gender equality in line of what we are going to do with respect to the constitution itself. That's my view.
Okay, Ronnie?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I haven't heard anything specific from candidates right now. We're in the very early stages of primaries, et cetera. So I think I haven't heard anything specific from any candidate that will affect the investment climate. I think the questions that were raised earlier with respect to the other concerns about what's going to drive investment considerations into Chile are going to maintain, and those considerations which Christian just mentioned, such as you know, a more general a larger constitutional importance for social issues, pensions, health, water, environment, indigenous communities, gender parity, those type of things. I don't think any candidate's going to make major differences with respect to those issues, and they will be driven, in large part, the candidates will be driven by what this new constitution, what comes out of this new constitution, because that will have a very clear sense of what the street wants.
Yeah. Okay, well, it looks like we will have plenty of news and analysis to deliver this year from coming out of Chile. As you know, we in Americas, we produce a monthly political risk report to analyze the main issues, events in the region that, and also political events, and also reforms and regulations that impact on the industries that we cover. So it will be an interesting year and an interesting reports to read this year.
So you've been very busy during the last year, I think.
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't get the question.
No, I mean, I was just commenting that you were very busy in BN Americas last year. Then.
Yeah. I know. Fortunately or unfortunately, we are always busy covering political issues in the region. Yeah. So again, that's all for today. Thank you very much, Ronnie, Cristian, and Sebastian, and thank you all for connecting to this webinar today. As I was saying, what you heard today is part of we deliver every day to thousands of subscribers to BN Americas. So if you're not a subscriber and you want to see more, please visit benamericas.com and ask for a demo. Thank you very much. I hope you have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Clients change, businesses change. The world is transforming faster than ever, and the opportunities are there, waiting for us. Over 20 years of digital innovation have turned us into the leading business intelligence provider in Latin America. BN Americas has a database with thousands of industrial projects, company profiles, key contacts, news, reports, and data, all in one easy-to-use platform. Every day, more than 50 on-the-ground journalists and experts analyze the region's major industries. Explore projects that feature opportunities for your business. Find the companies participating in those projects and connect with their decision makers. Make the best business decisions with all the facts and insights you need about the industries that are driving the Latin American economy. Get timely reports with the latest news about projects, regulations, and investments. Stay on top of the business trends. Find out what the risks and opportunities are for your business by reading the reports and analysis of our on-the-ground experts throughout Latin America. Redefine your business strategy and choose the path to success. BN Americas, connecting opportunities.